Hello, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Today we have a special guest all the way from the other side of the pond over in the UK, Sussex, England, and we have a transhumanist who is going to share his perspectives on what he thinks. Maybe we Christians are missing some of it. Maybe we're being a little bit too close-minded. And he's been a purveyor of some of the videos out there, and he thinks that some of them are a little bit ill-informed, and so he wants to just help us see maybe a different perspective, and I really appreciate that. So Luke Wykman from England, thank you for coming on the show.
It's good to be here, Doug.
Yeah, now you said you are into technology, you have a web company, is that right? So
Yep.
kind of tell us a bit about how you got into transhumanism, or what exactly that title means for you.
Well, to me, I see transhumanism as an application of technology for the betterment of human beings. So that would be anything from longevity, which you spoke about in your talk, to just well-being. Like all of these things form just a wide array. It's a very broad subject, and I would define it personally for myself as someone who would advocate and actively pursue those technologies to try and help people.
Okay. Okay. So the kind of things that you've been seeing, maybe from me, from others, and you were very gracious in your comments, so I appreciate that. But kind of give us a little rundown of what you think. What are you hearing from this side of the conversation? By this side, I mean essentially the Christian Bible perspective conversation that's kind of chafing you, and maybe some of those comments are. I mean, I may agree with them, I may not. I don't know, but what are you seeing that's kind of hitting you the wrong way?
I see it as a form of fear-mongering.
Okay.
I think that your approach to things comes from a position of more about fear than it does about um, the usual blowback that technology has received throughout centuries.
Okay.
There's always people, and I think that they usually fall on the religious side of this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that that's one point that they're missing, and they're also looking at it as a form of cult almost. I think it's it's literally there to subvert God in some kind of way, and I I don't think that that's an accurate way of looking at it. I don't think that most transhumanists, if they're not religiously inclined anyway, I don't believe that they actually focus too much on that topic,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of it. So they do it despite God, and not to spite him.
Okay. So it's out of a complete disregard, one way or the other. They're not, trying to do something against God. They're not even really thinking about God. They're simply saying, how can we make the world a better place? How can we take away human suffering? How can we extend the human lifespan? Are those the kind of questions that you would say transhumanists are more thinking about?
Yeah, it's the pursuit of using the available or futurely available technology to try and improve people's lives, and that's about as far as what most transhumanists would go, unless you spoke to some pretty radical people.
Okay. Do you think there are any radical people out there? I mean,
I think I wouldn't say radical. I would say um, very, very optimistic would be the word that I would use for them.
okay. And what do you make of Elon Musk's comments that we need to really be careful of AI because we're summoning the demon, and he makes reference to the idea of the holy water and the pentagram, and the guy thinks that he can summon the demon and keep control of him, but it never works out that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think Elon Musk said that as more of a metaphor than to be taken literally as to what he was saying. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk is atheistic in his worldview. I'm not 100% sure about that. But yeah, I agree with him. And he's also someone who is pioneering the search for AI, which is,
It's true. Yeah.
You could see that as a bit of a double jeopardy on his opinion there, but it's if he's so worried about it, why would he pursue it? If you get what I mean.
That's a fair question. Do you think it's possible to believe in transhumanism and God, or the Bible, or any religious creed for that matter?
Uh, there are, as far as I'm aware, there are a few Christian organizations which would label themselves as transhumanist. I think there's literally one called the Christian Transhumanist Luke.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, I don't see a conflict there. I mean, there isn't. Um, I was reading a quote just before I came in here. It was from St. Paul about ushering in or bringing forth a new humanity.
Hmm.
Doesn't that sound vaguely transhumanistic to me?
Okay.
That the if you want a bit of biblical slant on it, that Christ would have came and ushered in a new era for humanity. So you could spin it either way, I guess.
Okay. I see your point. I see your point. Um, so your big thing with a lot of these videos and teachers and things that you're hearing on the Christian biblical side of the fence are that people are fear-mongering. They are labeling technology as somehow maybe inherently evil. Maybe it's a Luddite perspective a little bit. Um, Maybe a bit of a double standard, because here we are using technology to have a conversation in real time across the ocean, and I have no problem with technology here, so why should I have technology when it comes to something else? So would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you would be anti-technology at all. Mean, I did rewatch your speech, the one I commented on, transhumanism in 666, I believe it's called.
Yes.
And you do say at the beginning that you're not adverse to technology in the slightest. You do like technology. You think it's a wonderful thing. And I think a lot of it deals in hypotheticals. A lot of transhumanist thought does anyway. It's a
Mhm.
lot of future thinking, future trends, future predictions. And that
Mhm.
scares people because you don't know what that will be. But once it's realized, you probably won't even notice it.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Now, are you familiar with the prophecy in the Book of Revelation about the coming of the mark of the beast, the image of the beast, 666, and all that stuff?
very, very vaguely. Uh,
Okay.
I did
Okay.
listen to your part on that again, though.
Okay. So yeah, I think part of the challenge from my perspective, and I can't speak for other teachers, for other Christians, I'll just speak for me. But when I read that, I say, wow, this is really amazing. It talks about someone who's known as the beast, that he will come out of some particular people group. And then the language very much sounds like a high-tech kind of future, a very dystopian future, if you will, where power is amassed in the hands of basically one person or one small group, and then he forces everybody. Actually, he creates an image of the beast, an image of himself, or the word there in Greek is icon. So an icon, like an icon. So it's something that represents or looks like it's the very image of himself. And as I tried to suggest in my video, transhumanism and 666, that what we have is a lot of technology that just all individually, I'd say these things are pretty cool, but if you put them together, it's my thesis that it would take one crazy person to kind of flip the switch, and what could be used for good can also be used for evil. And so that's what I'm suggesting, is not that evil itself is bad, because I mean, excuse me, yes, evil is bad, sorry, not that technology itself is bad, but that technology can be misused. And what I see in the pages of the Bible, written thousands of years ago, talking about some kind of a system where nobody can buy or sell unless they have this particular mark. There'll be some kind of an image, an icon, sounds like a robot that will have breath. It will also be able to think and to execute commands, and even execute people for that matter. And then people are going to be so enthralled by this thing that everybody is, well, not everybody, but everybody will have the opportunity to worship this. And if you don't, there's a very big consequence. So what I would suggest is that it's not so much that we have a Bible versus technology or even Bible versus transhumanism, but I would suggest that we see a trend that's happening where technology is heading in a particular direction, especially when it comes to genetics and such, and that we will eventually change our genetics to such a degree that we will actually change out the very image of God that we were created with. And that's where I see, it's up until that point, everything's okay. But once we cross that point, I think that we've entered into a very different realm. And the Bible even talks about people who will seek death and it will escape them. It will flee from them. They will not be able to die. Well, if you can't die, what do you call that person? That's called an immortal, right? So, that's where I would say that what the Bible has forecast for us is something that looks a lot like transhumanism, not in their noble attempts to end suffering, to mitigate disease and extend life. I think those are all very noble, but again, I would suggest that it could be put in the hands of the wrong person, and then that person could then take it and use it for a very nefarious end.
And
Does
that
that
would
make
be just genetics.
Well, I see genetics as one very important component of this. The Bible talks a lot about the word seed. And if you look at what a seed is, at the very core of a seed is just DNA. That's all a seed is. The word in Greek is sperm, right? So a seed is sperm, and sperm is just seed, and it's DNA at its core. So the fact that we can now manipulate DNA to such an extent, I'd say, wow, that's really cool. That's exciting. It's amazing what man can do. I'm impressed. Okay. But again, I would suggest that we need to be careful because I think we're opening Pandora's box. And hear me out. I don't think that the average scientist, or probably 99.999% of all scientists, have any nefarious, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll kind of philosophies. But they're actually, these technologies could then fall into the hands of the wrong person, who would then misuse them and apply them in a way that the creators never intended, but now they will be used in such a way that will be attractive to people, and it will have very very dangerous consequences, at least according to the Bible. So, but I mean, that's where I'm coming from. But from what I hear you saying is like, hey, wait a second, guys, why are we all down in the mouth on technology, even on transhumanism, when the people that are doing this want to improve the world, they want to help suffering? So maybe we need to kind of figure out, are we listening to each other, or are we just, we're talking and you guys are like, you guys, you Christians are nuts? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's focusing on entirely the negatives of everything. You can do the same thing. You could make the same case for the atom bomb.
Mm-hmm.
You could make the same case for religion itself. All of these things have inflicted suffering throughout the years. And when someone maniacal gets in control of these things, they can sometimes, I mean, I'm not exactly quite sure what you think will happen. You saying that you think that you're going to mess with genetics, so they'll take away from the image that you was created in. You think that, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm assuming that you want that the immortality aspect of transhumanism, which isn't really a goal, I would say it was more of an ideal more than a goal, but that would you say that that was changing God's plan in an unnatural way, or something
Well,
like that?
yeah, I would suggest that um, that God wants us to be immortal, but when we try to do that ourselves, it will fall on its face, and that He has already promised to make us immortal. Um, and that, of course, is going to happen at the time that we call the resurrection, that we will get a new body, and it'll be really cool. And so, and again, if we try to change it through the transformation of our DNA, that, and I'm not saying that we can't do any kind of genetic research or um, genetic, therapy, but rather what are we mixing ourselves with? That's what I would say. When you start adding code to something, you start copying and pasting code, and now through CRISPR technology, we are able to put that directly into the nuclei of our cells. That could have some unwanted consequences that we
Mhm.
don't know what will actually happen. And when people are talking about mixing human and animal, I mean, this is, again, and I talked about it, quite a bit in the previous presentation, but this is something that's not just science fiction. I mean, this is already happening in many respects, not all of it, but a lot of it is already happening, where they're mingling. In fact, in the UK, back around 2010 or so, they had, for 3 years, they had been mixing human and animal together to make what we call a chimera. So, as a transhumanist, how would you say that that's ethical, or that, there's no problem with doing that? I mean, how should we regulate ourselves?
But this is exactly why there are laws concerning things like human cloning and stuff like that. You're not going to have a problem with uh, half animal, half humans walking around. I think that the idea is far-fetched. Um, I don't think it's very plausible. This sort of technology, once it reaches a point where it could uh, potentially accomplish that, it would be regulated to hell. So, it would, there's no way that these sorts of things would happen. And I mean, you're saying that they created chimeras in this country. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with that, but I'm pretty sure that that was just on a cellular basis. It wasn't actually living, walking, breathing humans. Um,
No, I understand that, and you're right. It wasn't. They destroyed them before they got too old. But, again, I think the people that were doing that weren't trying to overthrow the world. But at some point, how do we actually get to that place and say, well, wait a second, because there could be just somebody who says, hey, we have the technology to do it. Why should we stop? Let's go to that next level. Let's keep going and push this thing until we have actually really changed our DNA to such an extent that we no longer are representative of what God created us to be.
hmm. But again, if someone really wanted to do that, I can't imagine why they would, but if they did, who is anyone to stop them from doing it? And so I understand your point,
Hmm.
but you're approaching this entirely from a biblical perspective.
Sure.
I think that um, you see things where you see malice where there isn't any. And I know you're saying that these scientists aren't actually like that, and you're worried about it potentially getting into the wrong hands. It's all hypotheticals, and yet the whole movement gets condemned. That's what I mean. And genetics, even CRISPR, which they've even openly said that there are concerns about this. They don't know the knock-on effects of meddling with this stuff,
Hmm.
and so it'll be a long time before they do iron out all those kinks. So
Okay.
yeah.
So this is your chance. Maybe let us know on this side of the fence, on the biblical perspective side of the fence. Uh, how would you want us to see the world, or at least this topic, in a way that's much closer to your own perspective? What do you think is a more responsible approach? And then sort of paint the picture for us of where you think transhumanism is going to take us versus what we are prognosticating.
Again, I would redefine um, for those people who have it in their minds that it's completely evil, a cult-like movement. I would point out that I think most people, I think as I said in my comment to you, are transhumanists. I don't see a distinction there. Like I want them to view it as the technology which brought us dialysis, which brought us modern medical equipment. Look at all the vaccines that we've created. All of this is messing with the nature of things.
But is that
And
really transhumanism? I mean, that seems like you're jumping, you're applying a label of transhumanism to basically anything that has to do with science and medicine and
no, I'm applying it to anything which has alleviated some form of human suffering through the use of technology. If these people could not live without some sort of scientific breakthrough having occurred,
so
and
what
that,
is, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying that that is what I consider to be transhumanism, and I think that maybe not your community, I'm not hugely familiar, but just the general YouTube Christian community tends to focus on mainly the life extension aspects or longevity aspects of transhumanism, and they don't
Mhm.
give much thought to what they're condemning. They don't think about, like I just said, what about someone who lives with a pacemaker? That's merging man with machine, isn't it?
Mm, okay,
And
fair.
so,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know,
Right.
people who have prosthetic limbs or anything like that, robotics applied to them, just to increase their quality of life. I've not seen any of this used for malice yet. And
Okay.
you might say, well, that might be coming in the future at some point. Some evil dictator is going to get his hands and make an army of genetically enhanced super soldiers, or he's going to. But again, that's science fiction. There are many things about this which I do think is just scaring people. And I understand that you have a deeply held belief about your biblical perspective on this, but I don't think you don't really have anything to worry about, is essentially what I would sum up.
Okay. So we're saying the sky is falling, and you're saying the sky's not falling, basically.
Well,
Is that right?
yeah, there's no
Yeah.
compulsion in this. Like, if
Okay.
you don't want
Yeah.
to have genetic therapy, you don't have to. If you don't want to, there are many religious organizations who opt not to. And in one thought of transhumanist philosophy right now is that in the future, once you would get to what you uh, refer to as like a post-human state,
Mhm.
you would have people who would be, I think the term they used was humanish, where they would just refuse all of this.
But what if,
And
what if we get to the point where they say, Doug, it's fine if you don't want to do it, but your kids have to get this therapy, and it's unethical for you not to allow them. I mean, we see this on a different level, but with vaccinations, that there are people that have very strong reasons why they think that vaccinations are not right, and whether we agree with that or not is not the point, but that is their strong conviction, and they may have some scientific reasons, they may have some religious reasons, but they're like, no way. And in fact, there was a lady recently jailed because she did not have her children vaccinated. You cannot send your kids to certain schools if they're not vaccinated. So we have, a case where, this is now a precedent saying, look, if vaccines are this way, imagine that we have a technology that is able to change the genetic makeup of a child, and the parents say, no, we do not believe, on many reasons, many technologically, scientifically, biblically, etc., we don't think that's right, and we
yeah,
don't want our child to get that. What would you say to that? Would they be unethical to not let their kid or to not put that on their kid?
I there's a difference between whether I would say it was unethical or whether it would be compulsory for them to do it. I think that if all the evidence that we have points to that being the best route for them, say for vaccination, which is, in my opinion, the truth, vaccinations, you should not deprive children of vaccinations. Then I do think that that is ethically wrong. I don't think that the
Okay.
state should be able to force you to, but I do think that there's a reason. Do you think that something can be objectively true in any real sense?
Absolutely. Yes. I most certainly do. Yeah. Like, a lot of things are
So,
objectively true.
okay, so there are. the reason we have the scientific method and the reason we have vaccines is because we've proven them to work. We've
Okay.
proven other things that I know that you would disagree with on religious grounds, things like evolution and things like that. But these things can be objectively proven to be true regardless of religion. So
Okay.
removing religion from the frame altogether, you're still left with something regardless of whether you believe it or not. So if this technology would help a child, say, not develop a genetic condition or not fall ill with polio or anything like that, then it would be unethical to deprive them of it, in my
Okay.
opinion.
Okay. So if we ever got to that stage, and now we have this transhumanist technology or genetic engineering, for whatever you want to call it, that says we can heal that sickness. All you have to do is take this new hybridized code, and it's going to go into into your child. It's going to change their genetic makeup in a way that the parents might be very adverse to. Let's assume that they're not Luddites and they're not stupid. They've actually done their research and they're like, okay, I understand what's happening, but I still don't agree with it, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. But
Well, a
you
lot
would
of it,
suggest
yeah.
that it's unethical for the parents to not allow their child, to get that procedure.
Again, it comes down to welfare more so than trying to infringe. You don't want to infringe on parents' rights to raise their children however they see fit. And I'm sure that you would agree with that. You wouldn't want any interference in how you raise your children.
Fair enough.
But again, if a child was being abused, you would take them away. If a
Yes, I
child
would.
was, yeah, if a child was dying of cancer, you would give them treatment. You would help them. If this hypothetical uh, a vaccine, drug, whatever, would help them, then that is surely a good thing, objectively. Yeah, you can't argue about it. And children are not necessarily of your opinion either. This is why I would agree with you that the natural bedfellow, I guess, of transhumanism would be atheism. I know that that would annoy a lot of people in your community, but and so children, in my opinion, are not born religious, so they don't have to adhere to, say, religious objections based on parents. If something is objectively true, like this vaccine will prevent you from having this birth defect or having a predisposition to this later on in life or whatever, I
Mhm.
don't see the negative to protecting people's well-being.
Okay. And neither do I. The question is, how do we go about that? That's always the big question, right? I mean, I think probably most parents want their child to be very healthy as possibly can be. Um, but there may be things that parents may hold that are not. This is the challenge. Okay, where do we draw this line? What is our standard of right and wrong? And that's a whole nother discussion, a whole different topic. But let's kind of get back to the transhumanist manifesto. Some people believe, according to Richard Seed, he's a transhumanist. He says, we're going to become gods, period. And if you interfere with me becoming a god, there'll be warfare. All right. So we have those kind of statements. We have the Ray Kurzweils of the world who are very well funded. He would like to resurrect his father in some way or form. And then you have the 2045 initiative, where they paint this picture that by 2045, we are going to become posthuman. We will no longer be encumbered with this body. We will merge completely with machine so that we become altogether different. From what I'm hearing you saying, you're looking at transhumanism simply from the perspective of, hey, let's help people. Isn't this great? And let's call it transhumanism. I would argue that while there are some nice things that are happening, and I'm not necessarily opposed to those, I believe that the real motivation, the goal that's kind of at the back of a lot of people's minds is, let's become something different. And I would also suggest that it's based on this idea that we have evolved this far. We evolved from the goo to the zoo to you. And so let's now take that to the next step. Let's take direct control of our own evolution, and let's become what we want to be. And
Yeah.
hey, who are you to tell me that I can't mix myself with a tiger? I can't mix myself with an ape or something. You know,
Right.
that's where I would say, wait a second. I see that there's a very something's very wrong when you start mixing human and non-human together. That's I get it when human to human, or maybe we just kind of correct that little code. You know, the A, G, T, and C are out of sync. Okay, let's fix those, and voila, we've solved some genetic disorder. Great. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. In fact, I'm probably mostly for it. But I think that's not where transhumanism is going. According to the research I've done, it's going in a very different direction. It has a goal, which is become post-human. So
Yeah.
what do we do with that?
No, I agree with you. I'm mainly focusing on what I was saying about how I'm applying a broad brush, as you put it, with well, as I put it, with transhumanism applying to anything which helps humans and has a technological slant. If you want to, like, I would consider myself in terms of schools of thought with transhumanism, I would subscribe to Ray Kurzweil's transhumanism more so than Dmitry Uskov, who is the 2045.
2045. Yeah.
Yeah, I see him as a billionaire with too much money. So he's scared of dying. Like, what's the one thing that rich people cannot have? Immortality. So that's what they want. Whereas Ray Kurzweil, I think, is his first invention was exactly what I was describing to you. It was readers for blind people. That's a transhumanist
Yeah.
philosophy in action.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree. And if you want to hear the more radical beliefs about these things, I don't think that anyone should stand in the way of someone who does want to, say, splice with a tiger or something like that. But I don't think that that's going to happen. Uh, I think that you would have greater issues from different technologies before that would ever reach that point.
Okay.
Like
So
I think,
people like Juan Enriquez from Biotechomony say that we're looking at Homo evolutus. It's humanity 2.0, where we are going to become a different species, if you will. And within 30 years, they're saying that we are going to be very different.
yeah,
I mean, are these just guys on the fringe, or are they more the mainstream, in your opinion?
I would say that the things they would hold all the things I'm saying to you, but they would also have either extreme optimism about our technological future and on these issues, and they would put forth their sometimes crazy sounding theories. I do think that um, like the 2045 initiative, it's completely out there. No one's going to do that, but you can get other people like Aubrey de Grey who are focusing on reversing aging and Ray Kurzweil. You said I'm not even sure if he believes it, but he's into the whole cryonics movement, isn't he? And all of that kind of stuff. So you would object to this just because it alters human beings. I mean, human beings are being altered all the time. You were altered as you were born, and I don't see the conflict there. I don't see why you wouldn't, why that's it's such an issue. I understand that you want to. You're really worried about you keep saying about the splicing of animals with humans and mixing humans with animals. Well, I mean, depends on your viewpoint, but you could say that humans are animals. And the I don't see to what effect. It's usually transhumanist thought follows to what effect. Um, uh, it's not just playfully messing around with humans. I would say that they would alter genes to improve eyesight, to cure conditions, to do all of these types of things. And for the more radical stuff, I do believe that we will have to eventually merge with machine. I think it's an inevitable outcome of these. 'Cause do you accept that human beings have limitations?
I
Do you
do.
think that,
Yes.
yeah? So you would say that the human beings have limitations. You acknowledge that, and do you think that those limitations are hard set by God, for example, or that you cannot overcome those limitations without somehow subverting His plan for your life?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. That's a challenging one. On the one hand, I would say that if we are only talking about the physical, then yes, we have limitations. I think when we start to take the teachings of Jesus much more seriously, he said that nothing would be impossible if we believe. So I think that part of the problem here is that the church at large, Christians at large, have not, for the last 2,000 years, taken the words of Jesus very seriously. And all of those miracles, if you will, the feeding the 5,000, the healing of the sick, giving sight to the blind, and all those things that transhumanism is now working on, I actually believe that he's commissioned us to actually go do those things. That we have the ability with God's power, that we have the potential, or let's say the capacity, to go and to do those things. I personally do not know how to do those things. Working on it, but I believe that that is actually our God-given right to do these things, and we have basically said, that's okay. We're just not going to do that. And so, because we have absconded our heritage and our birthright, then now we're looking to other things such as technology to overcome a lot of these things. So, no, I don't think somebody being healed of blindness is anyway against God's ideal. I think it's actually very much in favor. And again, I'm not opposed to people even being healed of blindness through surgery or technology. I think that's wonderful. So I'm not talking about these lesser things. What I'm trying to paint the picture of is that all these things are fine and they're good in and of themselves and they're very noble. But I believe that a day is coming, based on my reading of the Bible, that it tells me that there's a person coming who will be a maniacal maniac, who or a maniacal crazy guy, okay, who is going to take a lot of the technology that humans have been working on and is going to twist it. And this is where I would say that that initial worldview is going to make a big difference, because as you already said, you think that we are animals, and I would beg to differ. I would suggest that we were specifically directly made in God's image, and God told us that everything is to reproduce according to its own kind. We're not to mingle human with anything else. Human and animal, that's bad. And I also believe that there are entities out there known as fallen angels, or demons, if you will. And they've had a hand in human history to some extent. And they have a nefarious plot as well. That may sound crazy to you, but I can understand that. But that is my worldview. And so, it's all going to come together, in more a more mainstream kind of talk. There are people that believe in these things called aliens. I do not believe in aliens, but I believe that there are other entities out there, that I would call angels or fallen angels. And
Mhm.
the fallen angels have it out for us. I think a lot of them are masquerading as aliens. And given the opportunity, would man potentially mingle his DNA with an ascended master or with some alien or something? And I think what I hear from evolution is, they say, well, we already hitched a ride on the back of a comet to planet Earth, so directed panspermia, right? This is Watson and Crick. Crick, I believe, right? Crick was the guy that came up with this idea of directed panspermia, that the DNA responsible for life, it just hitched a ride, and so we're already aliens. So what's the big deal if some other people should show up? So
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of these philosophies that are at the groundswell of what is going to move this and propel it in a direction that ultimately will be bad. Not the current day technology and the improvement of human life, that's all great, but the day's coming, and this is where the Bible is very predictive of what is coming. And again, when you have this technologically sounding language that predicts 2,000 years ago, it talks about some kind of image that has ability to move, and or at least to think and to breathe of some sort, that it can require everyone to get some kind of a mark, and nobody can buy or sell without this thing. That is quite astounding, and the fact that it was written 2,000 years ago, it should give us reason to pause.
Hmm. See, my argument against that would be that it would be a form of pareidolia. You're seeing what you want to see in this. You're applying, like, people applied those same prophecies that you're talking about to the advent of the world wars. They applied them throughout history, and they've always been proven to be wrong, or to be at least off on their timescales. And I just don't. I get that you are for the smaller, as you said, like lesser improvements in human beings. This general increase in quality of life for them. But then you would disagree with a post-human stage. So you could not, in your opinion, be a Christian, someone who is a follower of God, and not necessarily just be part of a human body, because you need to die to prove whether your religion is true. That would be my argument.
Okay. Yep, I see your point. I see your point. Well,
Otherwise, you're
yes.
waiting around for the rapture forever, if you get what I mean. So
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I know what you're saying. And fair enough. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I can imagine how some of this might sound a little bit strange. But then again, I mean, part of it is we have to kind of go back, and we don't have time to do that, unfortunately, in this show, but we'd have to go back and discuss human origins, because human origins very much have a connection to the human destiny. And if you think that we have evolved over billions and billions of years, then it just makes perfect sense. I mean, why should you die if you don't have to? If you can improve yourself, you can evolve in incremental steps and eventually become something greater than we are today. Oh, that makes perfect sense. What I would suggest is that we were created perfectly, and then through an act of disobedience, death, degeneration, and decay entered into the human condition, and that our creator, our maker, has a solution for that, and he is going to implement that in good time. And in the meantime, I'm to live a good life. I'm to be righteous. I'm to help people. I'm to have faith and to believe, and to live with the kingdom principles that nothing is impossible. That this power that Jesus spoke of, I actually have the capacity to do that if I would actually start taking him seriously, and I could walk on water, and things that transhumanists may dream of. I've already been given the promises of those. So I think part of it is that we Christians have abdicated our birthright, and so we're partly to blame for what I would suggest the transhumanist movement is now filling the gap, because we haven't been doing what we're supposed to do. So it's kind of embarrassing on the one hand, because I'd say we're partly to blame. On the other hand, I would suggest that people will believe what they want to believe, and if you want to believe that we evolved and it was all just happenstance and here we are and let's go for it, and then obviously that's going to very much challenge, or I should say change and direct your worldview to a very different outcome. So I don't think it's so much just sitting around waiting to die. I think God has given us incredible ability, and that we simply are lazy to some extent, or we're just not believing. And so, yeah, we do just sit around and, we go to church, we throw $20 in the plate, and we walk on and hope that somebody's going to solve all these problems. So I'd say, what the transhumanist movement is doing is in some respects very noble, but I think it's going to end very poorly, and I think Christians are partly to blame for that. So, and again, I think there's also another realm out there that we would call angels or demons or whatever you want to call it, Satan, etc., and that they have a part in this, and we cannot discount them.
Yeah. I just think, would you turn down immortality yourself through non-religious means? I mean,
I would, yes, absolutely, yes, because of what I know from the Bible. Otherwise, I'm all for immortality.
so what would the difference be? What is the difference of experience between, say, this Christian viewpoint who believes that after death they will have eternal life, and someone who has eternal life in this life? What is that difference in road path for those people?
That's a great question. I would suggest that, obviously the post-mortem resurrection immortality is God-given. The one that I could get right now is going to be a counterfeit. It may have good intentions, but it will do it in such a way that ultimately to attain that, we'll have to get code from a different source, and that code that I would call the mark of the beast will be given over by Satan himself to the man of his choosing. That man will then replicate his DNA and make it available for the masses. And the reason people will want to take this, not just so they can get through the grocery store faster or something like that, but so that they can actually they can become immortal. And again, the book of Revelation does discuss that. It talks about people becoming immortal, and then they regret their decision and they would like to undo it, but then there's no undoing that. So I'd say that, if we take the right path, the one that God has for us, he will give us all that we're looking for and so much more if we will follow his path. If we try to do it ourselves, we're going to have to play with the devil, so to speak. Very literally, though, we're gonna have to play with the devil and do it on his standard, his means of acquiring that.
Hmm.
So let me ask you: if you were given the opportunity to become immortal through transhumanist means, would you take that?
Of course. No, I don't see any reason not to. If you don't like, do you believe that, obviously you're a Christian. Would you say that everyone is entitled to not be a Christian, for example, if they want to be? Or would you
Oh,
say that you are
sure,
actively
of course,
pursuing this because, like, you understand, I don't have your viewpoint on this. So,
of course.
and many of
I lost your sound. I'm afraid I don't hear you anymore. Oh, bummer. It was going to be a great point, too. Okay, there you go. I think I hear you now. No, I don't hear. Oh, boy. Oh, how sad. Too bad. Well, keep talking. Hopefully we can get you back. It looks like you muted yourself, and I don't know if I can help unmute you or not. Let's see here. See if I can unmute. Yeah, you must have muted yourself. So very up at the top of your screen, you'll see a little microphone kind of thing. If you click on that, you can unmute that.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Oh, good, because I really wanted to hear your question and have an opportunity to answer it. Oh, you muted it again. Somehow you're muting, unfortunately.
There you go. That should be fine.
There we go. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Can't remember what my point was now. No, I was asking about whether I would take this option, and I said
Yes.
that I don't understand because it does seem to be like your community, not to lump you all together, but you do paint transhumanism as this like Luciferian movement who is out there to just distract from God, as if that's an agenda on their behalf. And if you got to understand that these people just don't care about them issues, the biblical issues that you think about, not in a mean way. It's just not the top of their concern. For the Ray Kurzweils of the world, for example, they don't care whether the God exists or whether God doesn't exist, or whether the God of the Bible does or the God of the Quran does. It makes no difference. All they want to do is achieve these things because they believe that this is the best life that we have. We don't have another one. So why not maximize it, have the best experience, the longest time in youth, with free of disease, and live a wonderfully happy life? And you could end it by choice, essentially, if you chose to.
I get that. And again, standing in your shoes, I can understand that. I can appreciate that. There is no God, so it's not like they're thinking against God. They're just not even. God's not part of their worldview. I mean, why should he be? Because he doesn't exist, according to some. And we have come about as by means of evolution. So let's enjoy this life to the very best, and that's it, right? And then when you hit whatever age, 500 or 900 or something, then it's over, right? Theoretically. And again, this is really a difference of worldviews, okay? And I can appreciate yours. I disagree with it, but I can appreciate it, and I think I understand it more or less.
Yeah.
And but again, this is where whether God exists or not, it really comes down to that question. And if God actually has a plan for us, if He has a better future that He's promised, that you're going to have a new body, you're going to have all these cool superpowers or whatever you want to call it, you're going to have access to those things if you do it my way. If you try to go about it a counterfeit way, well, then you will experience the benefits and the negatives of that other way. And that's what I would suggest. So I think everyone has a right to be a Christian or not. I don't think that we have to force people. In fact, God is all about free will, and that's why He allows us to do these different things. But I also think He's warned us, saying, look, you can do it. In fact, He says concerning the Tower of Babel that nothing would be impossible for man. And so I think transhumanism will accomplish their post-human end, but I think by the time that they do it, that they'll realize, uh-oh, we took a wrong turn. Our goals were decent, but because we left God out of the equation, we did not have the wisdom to understand the choices we're making, and then it will be a big mess. So, well, Luke, we're out of time. I want to thank you for coming on. This has really been fun. It's been very stimulating. Everyone in the comment section, I'm sorry we did not have time to get to your questions. I was monitoring them, and thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. And if you want to, feel free to share this video. That'd be great. We just want to thank Luke for coming on and for sharing his perspective with us. And I think he has made some very good points that we need to be careful that we don't broad brush and say that all transhumanism is Luciferian. And if I've ever said that, I apologize. That is not what I'm trying to say at all. I think a lot of the ideals of transhumanism make sense, but I think that the ultimate goal, whether people acknowledge this or not, I think it is being directed ultimately in a very bad way. So it doesn't mean that the individual people are bad, but I think the end goal is going to lead to a lot of suffering in the end. And again, I get that from my reading of the Bible and really nowhere else. So. But if human history and all of the great ideas that people have had and then how they actually turned out is any kind of indication, then maybe we should be more careful. I mean, socialism was a great idea, right, Marx? I mean, and yet it really turned out to be very bad in the end, unfortunately. And so I think we can make a case that anything that can be used for good, take the atomic bomb, as you said, I would absolutely agree with you. It had great potential, but it also has incredible potential for destruction. And that's where I would suggest that we're opening up a Pandora's box here that seems to have all the potential for good, and a lot of it does, but it also has great potential for evil. And I think that is where the Bible warns us. And it really comes down to whether you believe in God or not. If you think we were created by a divine act from our maker, or if you think that we just happen to stumble into existence through evolution, that is going to change how you see things. So again, thank you, Luke. Thank you for tuning in, for joining us all the way from the UK. Everyone, I would encourage you just to keep reading the Word. God is good. He does care, and He has new bodies in store for us. And so thank you. God, take care, everyone, and until next time, God bless.